Move more together for you, your team, and a good cause. Join the Movivo Move Days, the ultimate health challenge during Lent, and win exclusive prizes. Collect points for 45 days in the Movivo app, together with your colleagues or in your own personal way. Whether it's through your favorite sports, breathing exercises, giving up sugar, or ice bathing, every point counts. Are you ready?
Welcome to the Wonder Pill Movement, the podcast for everyone who takes their health into their own hands. Today we have another special episode. We're currently in the midst of the Move Days, a health challenge for companies and a good cause. Yes, many of you have already gathered quite a lot of points, established your routines, and today we have a very special new insight for you. My guest today is Dr. Meinhard Vintler, a general practitioner with a holistic approach. You'd all better be prepared. Today we're truly getting down to the core of the matter, perhaps even deep into the sensitive gums.
That's exactly right. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here today.
Dear Meinhard, could you just briefly describe yourself in a sentence, or maybe one sentence won't quite be sufficient, but a short description. Who are you? What is it that you do? And yes, what exactly will we be discussing today?
Yes, first of all, thank you once again for the invitation. I just mentioned it earlier in our preliminary discussion. This one-sentence description will naturally be quite difficult, but I will certainly try. So essentially, it's about this. I am a general practitioner. I do a great deal of therapies, or let's put it this way, approaches that are generally and holistically known, yes. That means there's now also an extremely wide range, if you say holistic, that covers everything from A to Z, yes. But essentially, I would say, if I were to describe it in one sentence, as you just asked me to, then it's about my idea, which is to understand the body using the logic of nature, and then, so to speak, with this biologic, to bring it into self-regulation. And there's an enormous amount on that topic now, which we also want to discuss today. And perhaps one particular aspect about me is that I'm very fortunate because, my wife is a dental professional and we actually work together. And what we've come to understand over the years is that oral health is extremely interconnected with our overall general health. Yes. And that is exactly what we practice in our clinic. This means the patient comes to us and is examined by both the dentist and the general practitioner at the same time. That's why I, as a general practitioner, know an awful lot about what goes wrong and what significance that has for overall health.
That wasn't a complete sentence, but I was just about to elaborate.
That sounds quite exciting. I had an initial chat with my colleague today, and she asked, who's coming to the podcast today? Then I said, yes, Meinhard Vintler, a general practitioner focusing on the connection between teeth and the body, physical health. How are our teeth connected to our joints? How are our teeth connected to our organs? What can we possibly read from them? She asked me, completely astonished. Something from them? We can deduce something from them. Can we really deduce something? What do our teeth tell us about our overall health, and what are the interconnections?
Well, this question already makes the whole situation really, really complex because it's like this. You really have to imagine it this way. For example, a patient comes in with a chronic problem. Yes, a chronic problem, I'll just take those very common diseases that practically affect us here in industrialized countries.
And there are so many things that are part of it.
Which are they?
Yes.
Consider rheumatism, consider skin conditions, consider intestinal diseases, consider thyroid problems, yes, or even more severe conditions like neurological diseases, multiple sclerosis, and so on, yes. So there are very many diseases, yes, which, if you look more closely, have a very decisive say in what's called the development of illness. And that is the autoimmune process, yes. This means that a great many things that occur are commonly referred to as autoimmune. And if you consider what autoimmune truly means, right? Autoimmune simply means that our immune system somehow goes haywire and it manifests on the thyroid, on the skin, in the gut, or just somewhere else. And if our immune system goes haywire, then we have to ask ourselves why. Why is our immune system going crazy? And that's not stupid. We haven't evolved over millennia into a flawed design, but nature's logic is actually brilliant. And if the immune system isn't working, then it's simply overwhelmed. And that's precisely the problem. By now, we actually know many, many things. That wasn't on our radar for a long time. But if you just take a set of dentures as an example, yes, I described it that way in the book too. The mouth is actually the body's landfill. There's almost no patient who comes to my practice or to us, yes, who doesn't have something where you'd say, okay, metals, plastics, root canal teeth, inflammations, but they don't feel it. It doesn't hurt in their mouth. Yes, and now let's get back to the question. A patient with rheumatoid arthritis arrives. Yes. And then you want to treat it, so to speak, with anti-inflammatory measures, but you forget that it has an inflammatory component, for instance, somewhere in its dental area.
This means that any other treatments you attempt simply won't be effective in that area because there's a hidden inflammatory focus lying dormant, which consistently prevents any progress, to put it simply.
Exactly. So simply put, that's correct. The problem is that individuality is sometimes so great that for some, a small thing has an enormous impact. And for others, they often have really quite desolate conditions and are actually still relatively well off. It's not, so there's no guarantee that if the teeth are bad, health is bad, but it is strikingly common, yes. Or conversely, there's actually no chronic condition that presents where you'd say, hey, the dentition is perfect, we don't need to do a single thing. That doesn't really happen, does it? And so I always see the opportunity that through this relief, through the dentition, I'm not sure how much detail we should go into right now.
Yes, we certainly can. We'll jump right into the action.
We're diving straight in. But now I'll use the very common example, mercury. Yes, everyone is familiar with amalgam fillings. Then it's widely debated, should they be removed or not, and so on. Well, per se, you really have to picture it this way. You're basically ingesting mercury on a daily basis. And the question that arises for me now, purely from a logical perspective, if we consider it again, is that truly healthy? And my firm belief is that if I have an ongoing immune process, then at the very latest, I should seriously consider what exactly is bothering my immune system. And mercury, for example, is a classic neurotoxin, and it's simply not good for our immune system. And so to bring this back, these connections, and the complexity really starts right here. Now you have a patient with various dental issues, yes. And we're not even talking about the liver or intestines yet, but rather about very basic toxicology. I have poison in my mouth and I'm sucking on it.
So is that a heavy metal? I mean, mercury, that's a heavy metal. Is that a heavy metal? Heavy metal is a poison. Yeah. That much is certain.
Neurotoxin.
It's
Anyone
a neurotoxin,
can Google it,
yes.
And then ask themselves, do I want to keep sucking on that my entire life?
Yes.
And now,
what happens when you suck on it? What happens to the saliva then? Where does it all go?
Yes, it's like this. You've got, what's interesting is that in our saliva, we essentially have electrolytes. This electrolyte solution reacts with a metal. When a metal is exposed, I'm making this more general now, it doesn't matter. This isn't just about amalgam fillings. It could be a bridge, for example, or an inlay or something similar. There's a lot of metal, or there used to be a lot of metal used, and then you suck on it and these ions dissolve. And these ions now have several ways to irritate the body. One of them is quite simple. It acts as a poison. Yes, our body is used to it. If there's dirt, it needs to come out. Yes. And with that, our immune system has a lot of work. And if I'm constantly exposing myself to it, then I'm also challenging my immune system every single day. It just has to clean up, make things tidy, and that's it. The second problem is, if you say, okay, the toxic effect is one thing, there's also the immune response. You can become allergic and sensitized to these things. Then, besides the toxic effect, I also have an issue with the resulting allergy. And the third thing that we also add on top of that is that we also assign teeth from Chinese medicine to a specific organ. There are teeth that have a special relationship to the heart, to the intestines, to the kidney, to the liver, and so on. And if a patient comes with an illness that, for example, somehow predisposes them to kidney problems, so that you have to be careful, or if they have a thyroid issue, then there's a specific tooth that corresponds to it. And if that tooth is damaged, then you should repair exactly that tooth, because for us, that tooth serves as an important indicator. What that means is, if this little warning light, for instance, the thyroid, illuminates, then one should also replace the fuse. Yes, this metaphor perhaps wasn't entirely explainable just now, but we might perhaps get to that a little later. Yes.
Well, a million questions come to my mind. I don't know how much time we actually have. Typically, our episodes usually last around 30, 40 minutes, but let's see how far we manage to get, and perhaps there will be a continuation very soon. Now you're saying someone comes to you now with a thyroid problem or whatever it may be. How does that process then specifically unfold? So, first of all, they come to you.
Right. So let's give an example. With us, it's actually like this. The patient comes to us. He really comes to us.
Are we in a room
That's
right
really
now?
it. Exactly. A dentist and a GP sit with the patient and their problem. Because from my point of view, take the thyroid as an example. Yes. So, yeah, patients come in and they're talking about thyroid problems. And then you look at it and you realize that the thyroid as an organ can actually only function in one way. It's just like a factory. It simply has to produce hormones. It can truly only function if, for instance, one has sufficient selenium, if, for instance, one has sufficient iodine. If within the hormonal system, particularly in women, one possesses adequate progesterone. And that's precisely where the fundamental issue truly commences. Who then actually investigates this? Indeed. Most of the time it's like this. You go somewhere, they check, okay, too little thyroid hormone, you get a medication, yes. And very few people then have it so that someone says, you have a selenium deficiency, yes. Or they have an iodine deficiency. You only really do that if you have something quite serious or something like that. But it should actually be the absolute foundation, because our body can only function if it has the right nutrients. And now, you must see, from my perspective as a general practitioner, I said, look, it would be good if we did a blood test, we check the hormones. So, maintenant, the amount salvo, is the body even capable of allowing the thyroid gland to function properly? And at the same time, my wife looks at this and says, perhaps there's mercury in the dental work, or an inflammation that you can't see or even feel. And so we combine these perspectives saying, okay, from my side, there's a crucial component that's vital for the thyroid gland. But from the dentition also comes a part that is important for the thyroid gland. And so we synergistically try to offer the patient a solution or an option so that I say, hey, I can also approach my problem a bit differently or a bit more complexly. Yes.
You mentioned earlier, if a tooth isn't healthy, then it needs to be repaired. Now, we've already talked about this before, okay, that in the past, people used fillings, mercury fillings. What exactly does repair mean then? How do you manage without mercury? Or
so it's again about the logic, to come back to my very first statement, about the logic of nature. That means our immune system is so intelligent that every foreign body per se is simply rejected or processed. Yes. Our body gets irritated when it comes into contact with any foreign material. Yes. Well, and the thing is, if you look at it now, if you look back to earlier times, it was simply the case that with mercury, or rather amalgam, people had a fantastic option to repair a tooth. It holds up well, it's elastic, it has this plasticity to seal it perfectly. It was actually a great material, but over time, we've come to realize that what dissolves actually causes much more harm in the body than one would initially expect. Lab tests have become more precise, and our understanding of the complexity of environmental toxins has also improved. And now the big question was, well, what do we do instead? Then that evolved, and for a while it was very popular to say that the black fillings, firstly, nobody liked them aesthetically, so then we said white filling. I always ask patients, what is a white filling? May I ask you right away, what is a white filling?
Well, I have to say I don't have a single filling in either black nor white, so I've never really had to deal with the topic, but ceramic.
It would already be high end, but actually that is, of course, always a question of price, the whole topic, but usually it's plastic.
Okay, I understand.
So Thomas, the metal is essentially replaced by what I'd call a plastic material that naturally looks great.
Yes, the very name Kunststoff already tells you it's artificial.
Essentially, it's plastic. It's a so-called composite, and I believe most people actually have few concerns. But if I were to bring up a single word, or actually 3 letters, BP, bisphenol
I think
A.
by now for many it's already common knowledge, but explain it briefly, please.
Bisphenol A, I think that was a couple of years ago now. Then came the big plastic bottle catastrophe, because bisphenol A is toxic for our bodies and so on. And then everyone came out with bisphenol A free bottles, and that was great. That has now become so established that people have an awareness for this microplastic, but very few know that I have it highly concentrated in a filling in my mouth.
Okay, Bisphenol A is also present in these plastic fillings.
Absolutely. Yes, there are very, very many. And by now, there's a whole field of material science and also environmental dentistry, as it's called. Yes. And then you can state very clearly, okay, that this or that material contains this or that acrylate, like bisphenol A, DADMA. There are very specific abbreviations for these, and it's simply known that these are toxic plastics. This means they do something to our bodies, they act as a poison, but they also have a hormonal effect. And that's exactly the big problem. That means it's quite a science in itself to do a white filling, if I may say so. Well, so that it's also biologically compatible for the body, right? We don't think about it because we don't feel it. So, for example, I have 3 white fillings, everything's fine, my teeth are healthy, and to take the example of a woman, I have hormonal menstrual problems. Yes. By then, one should really, if approaching this holistically, take a look. Okay, what's there? What does she have in her mouth? And I've also had cases where simply through saliva and blood samples, we could detect this sensitization to the plastic material. So it can also be proven that it releases.
You can measure that in your blood. You can detect it. What kind of blood test is it that one has to undergo?
These are, of course, specialized labs. That's naturally not possible in a hospital or at a family doctor's. Logically, it's something very specific. But nowadays, there are a few very large labs in Germany that specialize in specific tests. And there, for example, you can do pollutant analysis, toxicological examinations. It's incredible what you can really gather from all that. And we're not talking about just any trends. These are accredited laboratories that can truly measure these things using the very latest technology. And with a saliva sample, we used to always do it this way. Patients would come in and say saliva sample, and that was great. They would spit into it, then everyone would see what actually comes out of 3 fillings daily. Yes, and then you really start to rethink. Now, today we don't do that anymore, because today our standard is when a patient comes to us, we've been doing this for over 10 years, and for us it's actually a basic requirement that they are willing to get rid of their metal.
Yes.
So for you, it's practically the main principle that stands above everything else.
This is actually the case for us. We are, of course, an exception to the rule. Now, this might not be the typical standard practice, but people specifically come to us because they have a persistent chronic problem and they state, hey, we know the teeth are the crucial factor here. And so for us, this type of partial restoration is actually truly the established standard, yes. This isn't necessary for everyone, no, but generally it's certainly the case that if you want to do something for your health, you should at least give some thought to what do I have, or could this perhaps be related to my chronic illness somehow? Yes.
Now, as you've already pointed out, this can all be measured. It is also indeed scientifically proven, but that wasn't the case perhaps 10 years ago when you first started out. Back then, it might have been dismissed as esotericism, especially in the Western world. The connection, how is a tooth supposed to be connected to an organ? For many, it's simply not tangible. So what can you say to that?
Yes, well, it was like this for a long time. People believed that mercury did nothing and so forth. And then, for example, I also have to mention the German Society for Environmental Dentistry. They were indeed extreme pioneers in that area, and they conducted a great deal of fundamental research on it, yes. And then you always have this perpetual question, amalgam in or out and so forth. And actually no one was truly able to state it precisely. It was known that it is poisonous and so forth. And so the thing is, they've actually conducted these investigations. And there is now, in fact, really concrete evidence to support the idea that a poison, so to speak, doesn't just work solely based on its dose, but also through the entire period of time during which it takes effect. And so it was then determined that it's better to remove the amalgam rather than letting it slowly leach for 10 years. It actually accumulates. And for example, quite recently, sometime last year, these professional journals started to appear. Back then, people used to think, mercury, it's no problem, nothing will happen. It has now been proven that these substances, for example, I'll focus on mercury for the moment. Yes, that mercury actually finds its way into the brain through the nervous system. This has now been scientifically proven. In the past, people used to say that none of this could be true and so on. Today, this so-called axonal transport, meaning that the mercury ions actually reach the brain through the nerve channels, that has been definitively proven. All of that can actually be truly substantiated. And with that, now I've completely forgotten the question. We were talking about the measurements, exactly about the measurements.
Esotericism, yes, this particular aspect, which perhaps wasn't clear many years ago.
Exactly. And with that, you then also know, because through the blood and through the saliva, for example, these, well, let's say,
complex processes can be mapped and a so-called silent inflammation can be detected, yes. It's no longer about me being sick, having symptoms, needing to go to the doctor, but rather it concerns these chronic processes where your entire system isn't quite functioning smoothly. There's a bit of sand in the gears, you see, but you're not genuinely ill, you're just perhaps not performing at your full capacity and so on. You know roughly what I mean?
I believe many of our listeners can relate to that, yes. Even in my circle of friends, many who, conventional medicine had no answers for, and where this holistic approach then worked. That's why I'm a bit presensitized to it myself. And I can really understand that, yes.
So we might now come up with the idea and say, yeah, well, Dr. Vintler, he just handles everything via the teeth and such. That's a rather short-term perspective, or perhaps a very superficial way of looking at things, because I'm facing a general problem right now. For instance, I'm feeling a little tired, or I'm not sleeping very well, and so forth. If you look at the problem in a complex or holistic way, you really have to, and we're not even close to holistic yet, we're still very far from Chinese medicine, yeah? So I actually look at these fundamental aspects. What's the micronutrient supply like anyway, yeah? That's also something I can report from my own experience, yes. Of course, that only speaks for my practice, not for others, but I like to perform this whole blood analysis. That means we really look, compared to a normal blood test, with a whole blood analysis, you can look inside the cell. And because a red blood cell lives for about 120 days, yes, you get a status, a long-term supply status. And from these mineral and whole blood analyses, I actually find, at least in my practice, out of 10 blood tests, at least 7 or 8 show a relatively clear, if not severe, deficiency.
What kind of minerals are missing then? Well, of course, you can't list them all now. It's a lot, but just roughly.
Well, it's actually the case that I always say the big five, I would almost say. It is actually true that selenium is extremely common. Selenium deficiency is one of the worst things. Yes, it's really very, very common and is massively underestimated how important it is, yes.
What's its importance? Let's review them. What are they and why are they especially important?
It's quite simple. Selenium, without selenium, the human body cannot detoxify itself. Yes, this means this is also something that you can easily read up on. If the selenium level isn't at least a specific value, yes, the body cannot complete its detoxification, yes.
Perhaps at this point, that's also a word, yes. Detox has become quite a buzzword in recent years. What exactly does detoxification mean?
No, it's actually not about detox or cleansing or those terms that are perhaps a bit ridiculed in the medical esoteric sphere. It's truly about our body needing to eliminate a foreign substance. Okay. Yes. And this glutathione system, you've probably heard of it somewhere before, right? It's a classic detoxification pathway for our body, yes. When we absorb various pollutants, microparticles, dust, or heavy metals. That's just how it is, you know. And the body also needs to get rid of it again. This works through this glutathione detoxification, yes. And it's not about any kind of detox processes. It's really simply about detoxification. And this detoxification only works with selenium. That is, for example, a very clear medical term where we are still far from any other things. So that's, for example, about selenium.
Okay, that was the first one. What do we have next?
But I need to elaborate right away. And I can tell you that this, what's the word, this pattern, you can apply to almost every nutrient by now.
Longevity.
Yes, it's a currently fashionable buzzword.
Yes. It's about nothing. It's actually about nothing else than aging healthily. And it's extremely exciting that, especially in the longevity field, people say they want to age as healthily as possible, and the brain must function. And the body, you must be able to think, and you want to stay healthy. Selenium is one of the most important things for our brain health. Yes, there are now a great many excellent studies available that clearly show how crucial it is for our cognitive performance. Yes.
Yes, of course, a topic that is also very much on the increase. Yes, the issue of dementia, the issue of Alzheimer's.
For the brain, for the heart, incredibly important. Selenium, for example. The next is vitamin D. I mean, we naturally have patients who are already aware. They have a certain access to these things. Most know you have to take something and so on, but name.
Let's consider now, yes, it's winter, it's the cold season, the sun probably isn't quite as strong.
Absolutely crucial, yes. And it's also massively overestimated or underestimated depending on the situation. There's still a significant amount of fear surrounding vitamin D. And there are also circulating rumors that it's toxic for the kidneys and that you can poison yourself with it and so forth, yes. Well, I can truly say we work with high dosages of vitamin D, and in all these years, I've perhaps had 3 or 4 patients who were truly so critical regarding the vitamin D that you'd say, okay, now maybe we should reduce the dose. But those were then self-experiments where the patients themselves increased the dose many times over that a normal person wouldn't do. No.
Where should one even begin, or what should one aim for? Of course,
Exactly.
there are standard reference values, but you see these standard values are often not truly optimal
Correct.
values. So then, what exactly are these standard values, and what would you personally consider to be an optimal value?
Yes. So most of the time, you always get these nice lab reports. Then people come and say, I went to the family doctor, had all the tests done, everything's in order, finished. And if you then look closely at the details, as you just correctly pointed out, there are, of course, these reference values. It should ideally fall within this specific range. However, many of these reference values are now obsolete, but they are naturally not adjusted. And for what reason would they be? This means that people with a clinically normal vitamin D level, I'm going to mention a number now, but you always have to be careful because there are various measurement scales. But the classic is that the classic scale everyone has in mind is that vitamin D should be between 30 and 100, a very wide range. It's about this 25 OH vitamin D3 that is measured. And there, if you take this level from 30 to 70, people say, okay, 31 is fine. It's not checked because it doesn't light up red. However, it is now actually known from many cross-sectional and cohort studies that the vitamin D level should be at least 60 to 70 so that the body's functions that vitamin D has can be fulfilled at all, so that it acts preventively and so on. Also, preventatively against any degenerations, but also for bone metabolism, osteoporosis, and so on. This means that vitamin D levels should be significantly higher. That is very, very, very important.
And the thing is, if you were to visit your general practitioner now and your blood test results show 35, you would most likely receive the response, that's perfectly acceptable, it's high. So
that's right, exactly. I hear that very often from my patients as well. But unfortunately, that also happens because many of my colleagues simply have no experience with this topic, because you just have to imagine it this way, especially for those who might have little insight into medicine. It used to be that people said, the doctor, the gods in white, and so forth. But it's simply like this. I have a specific field of expertise. That means my field of expertise revolves around micronutrients, the blood tests for them, infusions, the microbiome, and similar things. I do nothing else but these findings and blood samples every single day. No one will think of me for surgery. To get to that point, yes, or to ask me for a chemotherapy regimen, because I simply can't do it. Yes, that means that even within medical specialties, as a doctor, you specialize in one area, and you have expertise in that specific topic. But now, on the other hand, if I were to say, oh, we don't need chemo or we don't need surgery, that would actually be quite presumptuous of me because I really only have a very peripheral understanding of many of these things. And conversely, it unfortunately often happens that the family doctor says vitamin D is all nonsense, but he doesn't actually do anything about it. And that's actually unfair because these different specializations exist for a reason. And ideally, the desire would be to do it together, clearly to say, okay, this is my part, I'm an expert here, the patient will be well cared for, and vice versa. Certain things are then handled by the other colleague, and that would be the ideal scenario in medicine. But these networks are unfortunately not yet established.
Yes, of course, there's always more knowledge in every field. Each subject area itself gets deeper and deeper. And then to keep an overview of the whole thing, that is quite difficult.
That is actually the really significant problem because as a patient, you are now, in fact, only ever sent from one specialist to another. Yes, and there are actually few who then say, yes, hey, let's take a look at everything. Because if I truly delve into a patient's history and we take our time for it, but you just need time and you just have to ask and you just have to look at things, that simply doesn't happen in the system anymore nowadays because nobody pays for it.
Yes.
Yes, and that is actually the big problem. And many things could be solved much more easily if we were to look at them a bit more complexly.
We're only at 2 of the 5 essential big 5 elements. What else do you have to offer us besides selenium and vitamin D?
Magnesium? It's extremely important because without magnesium, vitamin D metabolism just doesn't work. And there are now, I believe, 500 to 600 metabolic processes that are magnesium dependent. Omega-3, a classic. It's also extremely popular right now, but it must also be said that this popularity actually has a real benefit. And omega-3 is extremely important.
Important for?
Omega-3 is fundamentally important for every single cell. That means each and every cell essentially has a protective layer around it, a so-called cell membrane, and its quality is highly dependent on the fats. And omega-3 acts as an anti-inflammatory agent, and it's also highly antioxidative. So there is an enormous amount of processes and functions that omega-3 helps to regulate.
Yes, and perhaps the fifth point, I would say cautiously that the B vitamins are to some extent a little bit underestimated.
They are also extremely important within the body's complex system for a great many processes, for the nervous system, for energy metabolism, and so forth. So many cofactors are these B vitamins. And it's quite surprising. You wouldn't even believe that vitamin B deficiency is not so uncommon among us. Yes, we would just have to investigate it.
Now, I've heard somewhere, I can't quite recall where I picked up this information, that there's no such thing as a natural B vitamin anymore. Could that possibly be true?
In the food? Are you referring to the food itself, or what one takes in? In the food itself, certainly, but what you're supplementing,
These are all naturally produced through fermentation processes and so forth. However, it must be said that the major manufacturers, and I do believe there's some truth to it because it's also evident in lab tests, they now offer these bioavailable forms, meaning these bioactive B complexes. And I really do believe that these, even if they are possibly produced synthetically or somehow through fermentation processes, that they are very well absorbed, because otherwise you wouldn't see the long-term improvements in your blood if that process wasn't working.
In the follow-up studies.
Exactly. What, for example, is an excellent natural source is buckwheat. A really, really significant amount of B vitamins, and also the full complete spectrum is present within them. So there are still food items that are actually quite good and perfectly fine.
Yes. To conclude this topic of minerals and supplements a little bit, how much can you really achieve through your diet? Do you have to supplement? And if so, how do you go about it? I mean, the market for supplements is truly inexhaustible. Yes.
I've probably become a hardliner by now, but I simply see so many blood tests, and I've been speaking with many people for a very long time now. I'll put it cautiously, given that food quality is drastically declining, the nutrient density, yes, the soils are depleted, selenium deficient areas and so on. As the burden and stress increase, yes, everything is much faster. Our system now has many more environmental triggers than it did before. I believe that the need has, first of all, significantly increased, and I simply see from experience, I'll put it cautiously, without it, it's almost no longer possible. This is how I approach it. I know many will crucify me for saying this, and that many will talk about nutrition and so on, but my practical experience shows that it becomes quite difficult without it, yes.
So what should one actually invest in then? I mean, there are just so many different products out there. As a layperson, how can I possibly assess the quality?
The easiest way to think about it really is like when you go to the supermarket. Yeah. How do you judge if what you're buying has decent quality? First, you look, is it a reasonably reputable brand you can trust? Where is it manufactured? And then if you're a bit deeper into the subject, you usually read what's actually in it. It's similar with supplements. So Indeed. The first thing I do is read what's in there. So that's it. And if you then see like an incredibly long list, yeah, maybe you should just keep your hands off it. But if you see, I'll take an example from magnesium. There are different magnesium salts. I'll take magnesium citrate as an example, and the capsule shell, that's cellulose, that's it. Then you can take it.
What we have here is a pure substance without any release agents, fillers, or artificial colorants.
As little as possible. That's actually the idea behind it. Exactly.
There aren't too many of them left anyway. We don't want to advertise for certain ones, but then the selection is already quite limited.
what I'm always surprised by is that we show our patients what they're taking and which products are currently popular. There are now actually quite a few really good manufacturers out there. Yes, you just have to take a look then. And how is it with the price point? That means when I say I always go by the total quantity, I mean, vitamin D, it practically costs nothing anymore these days. Yeah, for 10 euros, you can get top quality and that'll last you 3 months. Yeah. But if you, for instance, take magnesium, I tell the patient, please take 400 milligrams or 600 milligrams daily. Then it's quite easy to calculate the cost from one company versus another. And in such cases, practical experience often outweighs theoretical knowledge, because it's not always true that the most expensive products are necessarily the best.
Yes, it's also readily available in supermarkets. Yes. All right, let's conclude this particular chapter on minerals. I'd like to briefly revisit the topic of teeth and their intricate connection to our internal organs and the entire rest of the body. You mentioned earlier that traditional Chinese medicine has been aware of this for a very long time. So how exactly do teeth connect with our organs? How does that interaction actually work?
So in Chinese medicine, there is, of course, this meridian system. Yes. And this describes energy pathways, how, so to speak, the life energy flows through the body. And then there's this acupuncture model, which most people know, where you say, oh, there are these lines, and you prick them. You have to imagine it like this. Somehow, like when you have a fuse box at home, then there's the fuse for the heating in the kitchen or for the washing machine and so on. And then connected to these circuits, you'll find various appliances, washing machines, dishwashers, lights, and so on. And what's fascinating is that this model operates within our bodies through what I would describe as a not entirely scientific meridian system, which is actually quite real. I mean, it's even taught at universities, like acupuncture, for example. That means it can't be entirely incorrect. And so the situation is this. For us, the truly fascinating realization was, why are teeth somehow connected to the rest of the body? You hear about it occasionally, but we naturally began to always look at it with a focused perspective. And when you then observe, okay, you're seeing kidney diseases, then patients arrive with rheumatic conditions, and that's truly fascinating, isn't it? Then people with similar ailments, with similar damaged teeth, and that's actually what has truly convinced us over the years about these things, that you see, okay, I know, for example, for the men's world, For example, I'm tarnished in, I don't know a single patient of mine who has prostate problems and doesn't have some kind of issue with their so-called prostate teeth.
Okay, what are the prostate teeth?
Yes. For instance, it's quite simple. There's a dental chart, which you can download from our website or search for online. Just look for dental chart. Then you come across this overview, which explains how the first and second teeth and so on are connected to various organs, and the front teeth, meaning the central and lateral incisors, are clearly linked to the bladder, to the urogenital area, and therefore also to the prostate. Yes, and if someone has something like damaged teeth or anything, then it's always very interesting for us to observe that the illness is connected to this damage. By damaged, we mean, for example, teeth that have had a root canal or a large filling or amalgam inside. That's our indication, so to speak, that, okay, there must be something significant going on, because it's sometimes so strikingly evident.
What do you do then? What do you recommend to the patients? How does the tooth get healthy again? Or can it ever truly be healthy again?
Well, it really depends. A dead tooth, by its very nature, cannot become healthy again, precisely because it is dead. Yes. And that's actually something that frightens many people. And then they say, well, it's just some kind of money-making scheme and so on. But the problem is, we need to elaborate a bit on this now. What exactly is a root canal tooth? Yes. That's something that used to be a really, really big deal. So if a tooth gets inflamed at some point and the inflammation reaches the living tissue inside the tooth, that hurts terribly. And then the tooth essentially dies because the inflammation causes the blood vessels inside the tooth to swell and they strangle themselves. Yes. And that's also something, if you just imagine it, okay, a body part is practically dying off.
What that means is the root, the actual tooth root, will then be killed off.
Exactly. Because the inflammation causes the blood circulation to be cut off, and then the entire tooth dies because it's no longer being supplied. I'll use a medical example that most people will understand. Many are familiar with smoker's leg. Yes. Long-term smoking makes your blood circulation so bad that eventually your big toe stops getting blood and dies. Yes, or you're mountaineering in the Himalayas, get frostbite on a finger and it dies and turns black. What do you do then?
Cut him away.
Right. A fundamental rule in surgery is that dead tissue has no place in the body. And this one special exception is actually granted to the dentist. A tooth that has undergone a root canal is, in essence, nothing but dead tissue. And it took a long time for people to understand that when they say, oh, the root is clean, they are actually removing the living tissue. Yes. However, it's actually the case that studies have now also confirmed that in only a very, very small number of instances can you truly achieve a permanent state of being completely germ-free. That means even if you don't feel it, even if you can't see it, yes. It's a fact that in this delicate area, this, shall we say, decomposition process constantly continues in these hundreds, thousands of tiny channels. And for our body, for our immune system, it's a foreign object, a stress, yes. Even if you don't have any inflammation present there, even if your root canal treated tooth is not causing you any discomfort, it will still exert a long-term signaling effect on our entire body. And in our experience, it's often the case that if a root canal treated tooth is present, fortunately, for most patients who come to us and have had such a tooth for a long time, their body already begins to reject it. And you can observe a so-called cyst forming beneath the root canal treated tooth. This means it's already festering and trying to expel itself. Unfortunately, this process doesn't happen quickly. It takes decades and you don't even feel it, right? So this emphasizes as a disinflammation on the root canal tooth doesn't hurt. And for us, the only solution to this, and it's not just for us, but common in biological dentistry, is you extract the root canal tooth as isotonic and mixed it and then, and this is truly a novelty. It's been around for about 10 years. I'm not entirely sure. There are ceramic implants. And with this method, you essentially replace the natural root of the tooth with an artificial ceramic root. Yes, that's right. And then the entire tooth itself is replaced by an implant, by an artificial tooth, but without any metal components.
It's not metal, but it's still biologically dead. So it doesn't actually grow together. It's not living tissue, but the bone integrates it.
That means when you look at it with an electron microscope, this surface is not smooth. It only feels smooth, but if you then it's very rough,
what I'm
it
trying
gets
to say
integrated.
Is these particular germs that you were describing to me just a moment ago, they're no longer present.
Because you're essentially, when you extract the tooth, removing the inflammation, the bone bleeds fresh, and then the bone grows back clean and healthy. Yes, and on this healthy ground, as I would call it, you are then allowed to establish something new. You should even do that sometimes, because we are now coming to a very important aspect. Movement, yes, the entire musculoskeletal system and so on. The complexity is that our bite, a healthy, strong bite, is also not retroactively, that's not quite the right word, but rather in a complex way through the musculature, through the anterior and posterior kinetic chains connected to the entire musculoskeletal system. And if I get an imbalance in my bite, for example, by not replacing several teeth, then eventually this will have long-term effects on our musculoskeletal system. And that's why in biological dentistry, it's actually the case that all root canal treated teeth are completely replaced. Yes. What that means is if a tooth dies in our practice, we actually don't perform a root canal on it at all. Instead, that tooth is genuinely replaced with a dental implant. Yes.
That, in a manner of speaking, you can see how...
Yes, I'm completely fascinated. I could talk about this with you for ages. This is something I'm passionately interested in. When I look at our clock, we're already at 45 minutes.
Let's see if we've covered everything.
Right. You probably can't know absolutely everything. Don't pause. But you've also written down your knowledge in books. Pause. So anyone who's now really impressed and wants to learn more can, of course, get informed there. Pause. What books have you written?
So with Yoga, the idea is that everything is told very quickly and some things sound quite schematic, but at its core, it's a complex issue when a patient comes to us to figure out what we'll do. That's quite a task. It's not just a quick visit to find the solution. These are simply projects where people invest in their health. They say, hey, I want to restore my teeth. I want to balance my nutrient status. I want to get my microbiome in order. And since there were so many topics a few years ago, we thought, yeah, that was actually during the Corona period where I said, hey, now I'll use this time, I'll write a book. And my first book is actually about dental health and performance. Yes. And this is, I would say, written very technically for therapists, for colleagues, so that one simply understands that for all these things I've just mentioned, there are actually already laboratory examinations, facts, data, and so on available. How does one proceed with many case studies and so on? And then following that, a new book came into existence, our second publication, which bears the title, When Caries Blocks the Knee. In it, we thoroughly explain our work, written in an accessible way specifically for patients. So any patient who says, hey, I'd really like to learn more about my teeth, should definitely get this book. It's truly designed for a layperson, so you'll find yourself saying, hey, now I finally understand. What exactly do I need to pay attention to when I visit my dentist? What could he potentially be doing? Or where are there still potential dangers? Something just doesn't feel right to me. Have I even looked at that properly yet? And for that, this book is intended as a kind of guide so that even a complete layman can truly have these things explained, which are actually quite simple once you understand them.
Yes, but you just told me that you're working on a new book and something new is coming.
The new book is, well, it's almost like once you've written a book, you practically can't stop anymore because it's actually quite a lot of fun. I can certainly say that it is a great deal of work. Sure. And, but it's always important to me, you know, we really want our patients to have knowledge. Yes, and then they can decide for themselves. An empowered patient. If you know, then you can also decide much better for yourself. Is that, of course, you need an expert who then says, not build. Look, in your case, it's this way or that way. But if you have a little background knowledge, then that's good. And the third book, which is coming out in April, I kept a bit more general because otherwise everyone says, oh, he only focuses on teeth. But I also included these topics I touched upon earlier, the micronutrients and the microbiome too. And that's actually the title of the book, Healthier, Younger, More Beautiful. Longevity, anti-aging, that's a huge trend and people are doing everything, yes, and I want to critically examine that a little because many often don't even realize, for example, if you're removing environmental toxins from your dental work, I brought up plastic earlier, you know, very few people actually consider what they're putting on their face, what goes on their nails and so on. Probably, exactly. Yeah. And the scale of the environmental toxin problem out there is truly enormous. All of that will eventually catch up with us, and that's why it's all the better the sooner we start to seriously consider what we consume, what we apply to our skin, what goes on our nails, what goes into our mouth, because these things have a constant and lasting influence on our health.
So you've accumulated so much knowledge, having immersed yourself in all these topics. How do you manage to stay healthy? What are your most important daily factors to remain fit and vital?
It's really the very basics, yeah. I mean, it has to be said, we talked before, you know, I do a lot of sports. For me, sport is truly the best medicine. Yeah, I enjoy doing it. I do it a lot. I make sure that I really, even if it's a lot of work, I try to take the time every day to do a workout.
What would you say are your favorite sports?
I'm doing triathlon. That's naturally my swimming.
I didn't even mention that in the introduction. Over 30 Ironmans. 43.
43. This gentleman has completed 43 Ironmans.
Well, that's just how it all came about somehow. And I was always truly fascinated by the idea of doing it in a way that allows one to remain healthy. I don't think I ever overdid it because otherwise you wouldn't be able to keep doing it for such a long time.
Yes.
And I really make sure that when I do a workout session each day, swimming, of course, is excellent for the entire musculoskeletal system. Running, cycling are also fundamentally, if you do them correctly, a fantastic thing. And exercise, and it's also known, and this is getting quite complex now, anti-aging and so on. Sport, these muscle hormones are currently quite the buzz because it's known that muscle is an endocrine organ. This means by simply moving a muscle, performing a basic exercise, doing just about anything, for instance, going back to your app. If you manage to activate your physical system for just a few minutes each day, then through this muscle activation, you unleash so many positive effects for your brain, for stem cell regeneration, for staying healthy, young and beautiful, yes, that you simply cannot avoid sports anymore. Exercise. Sports, yes, people always think then in the...
Sport that is always connected with performance, exactly. But movement, yes.
Movement, exactly, quite simply, because it's always form follows function. That means our system is built in such a way that if you, I once heard this saying somewhere, but I believe that falls under copyright infringement. challenge your body? Oh, it will challenge you, yes.
Yes, it's a quote, isn't it?
That's exactly, that's just natural, I'd say. But doing simple things, moving, doing something for a few minutes every day is, I believe, half the battle. And for the rest, I make sure my nutrient status is in good order. I check that I am well supplied in every area. I take everything that I have told you about earlier. Then your microbiome needs to be in order, and your teeth, of course, must be in good condition anyway. And that's how I manage it. And I can truly say with pride that I haven't taken a single aspirin in 10 years. Yes. And what we do for ourselves, my wife and I, are our values, which we also implement and convey to our patients, and not just like, that would be good, but we actually do it that way.
That is, of course, very authentic and it's credible. And yes, I believe you've been able to get a really good impression of Meinhard. Meinhard, if someone really wants to come and visit you at your practice, where can they find you and your wife?
Villach. Exactly, we're in Villach. There we have this clinic concept where we say, hey, we really get down to business. We really cover everything from teeth to body.
Yes.
Of course, one needs to have a certain willingness for that. But for the smaller things, if someone says, oh, I'd really like to get a blood test done and so on, I've actually outsourced that because we simply can't manage it within that scope. And I have a second practice also located in Klagenfurt specifically for these matters. Things like quick blood tests or microbiome and infusion therapies and similar things. You can certainly do a lot there. You don't always have to take the entire package.
Yes.
You know, that's how we've structured it.
Yes, I want to say a big thank you. It's great that you shared your knowledge with us. I find it almost a little difficult today to summarize the most important points because there were just so many, yes. So what do I take away from this? This knowledge of the holistic context. Yes, we couldn't fully clarify that in 40 minutes today. There's still a lot to discuss. But developing this understanding, yes, that the body is a single unit, that yes, can certainly help us in our daily lives to better understand our own issues. You mentioned the big five, not necessarily the most important, but where you see the most deficiencies in your blood analysis. That's also something I'm taking away for myself. All this topic, which perhaps for years was dismissed as hocus pocus, you can measure that. You can measure heavy metal contamination in blood. You can measure microplastics in blood. You can, of course, measure minerals in whole blood. And yes, if you're dealing with chronic issues like that, then you should definitely take a closer look at them. I'll keep that in mind. And then, of course, we also very critically discussed the topic of amalgam and mercury as an exemplary case. As we said, we're chewing on poison, aren't we?
Yes, we suck poison.
We trust we're slowly consuming poison, and that, of course, has consequences, perhaps not equally for everyone. Some others might be more resilient, better able to cope, but in the end, there will be consequences.
Yes, but just perhaps the only thing I need to correct, microplastics in the blood, unfortunately, cannot be measured, even though it would be very interesting, but it's technically not possible. I specifically inquired about that. And this amalgam, I've touched upon it, but if someone is really interested, how do you do that?
Should it come out? How do we get it out?
We have described that in the book, in this book, Forstipation, very precisely why one should do it carefully, how one does it, how one accompanies it, and so on. It is simply a very complex matter.
Yes, for all of you who want to know more, we highly recommend the books. We'll link them, of course, in the podcast description. And yes, you can also contact Meinhard and visit him at his practice in Villach. And yes, thank you very much for being with us. I hope it was helpful for you. It certainly was for me. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank you for the invitation, and I wish you a lot of fun with your research. And
we're still going to have successful move days. We'll still be diligently collecting points and establish all of our healthy routines. Until next time, use it.
Together for you, your team, and a good cause. Join the Movivo Move Days, the ultimate health challenge during Lent, and win exclusive prizes. Collect points for 45 days in the Movivo app, together with your colleagues or in your own personal way. Whether it's through your favorite sports, breathing exercises, giving up sugar, or ice bathing, every point counts. Are you ready?